This is how to make your Sony Handycam waterproof. So this camera, this is the PJ430V. This came out in 2013 from Sony. This was their second to last consumer camcorder generation, the last one being 2015. But this is super cool because it has their Balanced Optical Steadyshot. So when I pop this open, you'll notice that it kind of has this like 8-ball sort of stabilization. It kind of looks like an eye, and it will move within there. Around 2015, they started marketing this as gimbal inside, which isn't super accurate because it doesn't have a lot of travel space inside of it. You'd be better off with like an DJI Osmo or a phone gimbal if you want to be able to stabilize stuff while you're walking. But where this really shines is being able to zoom in on stuff. So this has a 30 times optical zoom, and this kind of stabilization allows any kind of like vibration or camera shake to be completely absorbed when you're zoomed in. So I've held this out of a car window or even just handheld, like without a tripod. I can zoom in all the way and go pretty well. Out of car window, I think about like 10x is the max it'll go to and still be about usable. But I really like it. It has a really smooth mechanism and a really close like minimum focus distance when it's at the wide end as well. It does 1080p 60. I've added a matte screen protector to this thing, and I'm using it with a aftermarket NP-FV70 battery. This one's a little funky because it has the projector there too. I never use this. You can get the CX version instead of the PJ, and it's the same thing just without the projector. It has the micro HDMI output, so I use that when I use this to live stream sports. It has a headphone jack, mic input, and over here it has a DC input port. So this thing can be powered continuously while it's running. So if you're doing live events or something like that, you can plug this in. They make adapters that'll take this to USB, so you could power it from a USB power bank while it's running. And then this right here is the Sony multi-connector, and that'll be important because it is basically like USB micro, but you can't really tell here, but they added extra pins deep inside the connector. So this can actually act as a few different things, but the main thing that we'll be using it for is you can pipe in a microphone input through this, and you can also pipe in LANC remote control over wire. So LANC is a protocol that's supported on a bunch of different camcorders, but basically it allows you to control power, zoom, recording start stop, photo, and a few other functions. So this adapter, it's like the VMC AVM1, and it converts the Sony multi connector to the Sony 10-pin type of connector. And this type of connector was popular on Sony camcorders up from like about 2005, 2006 up through about 2012. So this camcorder that I have, this is this SR85 from 2008. It has that connector as its main thing. I also have a VG30 that came out in 2012, and I think that was one of the last cameras that had that connector. But they basically do the same thing, except for this one has USB as well. This one can't do USB on its own. But reason I got this, A, is because I have a tripod that uses this, and B, this can work with this underwater housing. So since the 90s, Sony has made these sports pack or media pack, yeah, marine pack, sports pack or marine pack type of underwater housings. And the marine housings are all yellow. They're more for diving and can go to greater depths. The sports packs ones are lighter and only can go a bit shallower, but this is perfect for like when I go kayaking or surfing, for example. So this has that 10-pin connector, and that's how all of these buttons on the outside connect to the camcorder. A lot of other housings, like for stills, cameras, or even for like the GoPro, they'll have the buttons on the outside, and they'll literally just push down a piston or plunger to the exact button on the camera that you need. So when you're buying housings for most other kinds of cameras, they need to be specific to the type of model that you're getting. Whereas this one, because it's connecting electrically over this, any camcorder that uses this connector or that can adapt to it can be used inside of here. So this is the SPK-CXA. I think it came out in 2011. So this housing was never meant to be used with this camcorder, because this came out a couple years after this came out, and this was the first generation to use the new Sony multi kind of connector. There's an older version that they made from like 2006 to 2009 called the SPK, I believe it's HC and then another letter. It's a bit bigger, so that then it can accommodate this kind of camcorder that has a big hard drive spot over here, or tape-based camcorders or DVD-based camcorders. So that one's a bit bigger and more bulbous, but those are very commonly found in the used market. They're not hard to find, and usually you can get them for like 10, 20 bucks. I also got this one pretty cheap, but this generation was harder to find because it was basically the last generation of this that they made. So luckily, this camcorder is also the last generation that can make use of this adapter. The subsequent version that has, so all of the camcorders from 2015, including the CX405 and the CX675, all of those have this Sony multi-connector, but they specifically say in the manual that they don't work with this adapter. I think it's because they changed the pinout of the multi-connector, and they added more pins or removed them, I forget. But this can still physically fit in here if you use a different bracket. So the bracket that came with this was a bit thicker, it's about twice as thick as this. But I pulled out my calipers and drew this up in my 3D modeling software and had this 3D printed. So what I can do is connect this guy up, and I'll find something to crank that down. I'm going to set that all the way to the front so it can fit. This is also why I whittled down this adapter. I took off some of the cable housing there, and I also removed the door for these ports so then this can fit inside there. So I'm gonna flip the screen out. I'm gonna kind of tuck this down, and then the way this gets done is I plug this in there, and then this actually needs to be on the top. So it should kind of sit like that. And you'll notice when I connect this, I'll show you in a second. So this is what the screen looks like now. You can see the standby thing in the corner. When I plug this in, it's gonna flip. So now you're seeing the mirror image, and I'll show you why in a second. So I'm gonna try and get this in there. This is a tricky part because the front of the camera and the side don't necessarily want to go. I gotta be gentle with it. I think I got that. Yeah, I did. So, okay, so this pin, this little thing right there. Oh, no, it's not. There we go. Now it's in. Yeah, so I'm gonna make sure that the cable is out of the way, doesn't get squashed in there. Definitely done that a couple times. Squashed it inside there. Look at this big O-ring. Like, that thing's cool. That's what's waterproofing this whole thing inside of there. So I clasp that shut, open this up, and then flip these two little doors out. And let's see if I can get my focus right. So if I'm right there, let's see if I can zoom this in. Look at that. Digital zoom on this, so it's not going to look great. But you can see I can now look in there and see what the camera sees. And it's mirrored. The camera mirrored its display output, so I'm actually seeing it like not mirrored on my end. I can read it. So I'm zooming that out again. It has a nice little hand strap here. It's all kind of like this rubbery fake leather. And I can use these buttons now to zoom in and out. So I can zoom this in all the way up to its 30 times optical zoom limit. And these buttons do have 2 pressure levels. The cutoff point between them is actually like really bad. So it can be annoying sometimes to try and, like, if I want it to be slow, it'll either, there's a very, very small region of pressure that I have to maintain. But if you slam it all the way down, then it'll zoom out or zoom in at full speed. I can push this button to stop the recording. You can hit mode to change to photo mode. And then at that point, the photo button takes over. So hitting record doesn't do anything in photo mode. But if I'm in video mode and I hit photo, I think it looks like it's taking a photo, but I think it might be taking a photo in 16:9 mode. And then you can also hit the power button and turn the thing off. So I think it's super cool. This is what it looks like from the front. It looks very sleek. Like the black camera with the black housing, I think looks super, super cool. This is basically something that would take the place of a GoPro where you need to zoom in. Canon and Panasonic and JVC also have some waterproof camera models. I think Canon was the only one that actually made housings for their camcorders, whereas Panasonic and JVC both had camcorders that were specifically waterproof. I think this is the best combo because these mics totally sound like a GoPro in a kind of a bad way. They're waterproof, which is cool, and these, you get the left and right stereo inputs coming into the camera, but they totally sound worse than the built-in mics that are at the front down here. They're better than they're better when the camera is inside the housing, if that makes sense. Like if I were to try to record from those mics while it's in the housing, it would be bad. So it's definitely a step up while you're using the housing, but it's definitely nice that when you're using the camera on its own, it can use the better mics that aren't waterproof. This is also the only, like Sony was the only manufacturer that had this kind of like floating stabilization system where it's mechanically separated. So that's really nice. I feel like that would definitely come in handy when you're on the water. So I've used this in a canoe and kayak, on a fishing trip and just doing that kind of stuff. I really like this more than a GoPro for that kind of thing on calm water, because if I'm not on rapids or something like that, then the wide point of view of the GoPro is actually kind of a hindrance. Because if I'm using this, or if I'm on my kayak with a group of friends in other boats and they're doing something and I want to take a video of what they're doing, or take a video of a feature or a waterfall that's off to the side, the GoPro is totally not the best tool for that because it cannot zoom. Its zoom is only digital, and honestly your phone would be better at that point. But I think this is the best combo for if you're kind of leisurely kayaking or canoeing, where you wouldn't necessarily want the camcorder outside the housing. Like it's totally gonna get splashed, or there's a possibility it could go in the water. But definitely a step up from a GoPro. It is kind of big, like definitely bigger than other cameras. This is a Panasonic camera that is also waterproof, but this one only shoots in standard def, so more of a retro vibe on this one. But you look at the size comparison, and this is probably like 8 times the volume of this thing. But the nice thing about it being big is that it floats. So unlike a GoPro where I might need to add a floaty, like one of those hand grips or one of those foam sticky things to the GoPro in order for it to float, this thing just floats on its own. So that's kind of the perk of it being big and bulky, is that it floats. And I don't think you could make this any smaller while still allowing this camcorder to fit inside. Right now I have the camera slammed all the way to the front to try and minimize vignetting from this ring on the side. There's still enough space in the front that you could add a filter thread, like if you wanted a polarizer, you could put that inside. I think if I made my bracket a little bit differently, I think I could get the full NPFV 100 battery on there. This one's a bit thicker. This thing can power this camera for like 6 hours straight, or 8 hours I think if this is fully charged. This battery that's currently on it, the NPFV 70, that can power it. Let me see if it says. Usually it'll tell me, only if I tap the screen. Yeah, it's not going to tell me. I'm going to have to pull it out. I'll pull this out and show you guys what that looks like. So it's still mirrored, and then when I unplug it, it's going to unmirror itself. There. And it's going to tell me 2 hours 46 minutes remaining on this battery. So I think that's plenty for most trips. You're not going to be recording continuously, and you can power it on and off, so you can totally conserve battery. This is way more battery than a GoPro would have. Like even the Hero 11 at like 1440p only lasts about an hour 15. So more battery life than a GoPro if that's something that you need. Like if you're in a situation where you're not able to switch out your batteries on a GoPro, this could definitely give you longer runtime. Yeah, this is super fun. I've only taken on like 5 or 6 water trips, but each time it's been a huge help. So budget for all of these, I got this camera for $150 a couple years ago. The adapter cable is like $25 new. And then this housing, I think I got it for like $20 shipped. That was a pretty good deal. You can usually find these for like less than $40 or $50 used online. So in total, like you're under $250 for this whole setup, which I think is super cool. And yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any other questions. I might post the file for this. If I were to make it again, I'd probably notch it, so then this screw could be further up. It's just kind of a bummer because this camera in particular has the tripod screw right at the front, whereas others from Sony that are meant to work with this camera have the tripod screw right in the middle, which I feel like is a better spot. But this has been super fun. I use this camera for a ton of different stuff. I've taken this rock climbing. This is my go-to camera now for filming like high school or club sports. And yeah, it also has this little USB here tucked into the strap. So that's how you access the internal memory on this thing when you're not using the SD card. I always recorded the SD card because I like that better. It can offload faster, but if you ever forget your SD card, you can always just record to the 32 gigabytes of internal memory. So there's that. Hope you guys enjoy.